Right. Welcome to the Tech and Faith Forum. So this is the second one of these forums that we've done so far, and the hope is that we're going to do something like this a few times a year to be able to work through different topics and bring in different speakers and to interact with those things and ask questions and hopefully walk away just more in love with Jesus and filling our minds with some of these thoughts. So I'm glad that you're here today. My name is Ryan Layden. I'm the campus pastor for the Egret Bay campus, but I also help to oversee our spiritual formation team and what we do as a church and how the different content that we put out. And part of that is leading the team that puts together the Clear Creek Resources website. It's a website we put out a couple years ago that has all kinds of different content, all designed to help you walk with Jesus and different things that you can share with some of your friends who maybe aren't part of a church community. And so we have things like articles and videos. We have a podcast. We post our sermons on there. And so if you aren't familiar with clearcreekresources.org, make sure that you check it out. Eventually, in the next couple of weeks or so, tonight's evening will show up on Clear Creek Resources as well. And so you can be looking for that, and you can share it if you find that this was really helpful. You can send that link to people as well. But let me give you the rundown for what's going to happen this evening. So we're going to break up between two different sessions, two different halves of the evening. The first half, we're going to hear from these three speakers: Nick Skitland, Carrie Murphy, Matthew Neighbors, all people who are part of Clear Creek Community Church, and they are experts in technology in all kinds of different ways. We're going to hear from them just short 10-minute or so TED Talk style talks, and then we'll have an interaction with them with a Q&A. We'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back to hear the next three speakers. And so those speakers are Sarah Vanderweel, Lindsay Leighton, and John Crump, also part of Clear Creek Community Church and experts in their fields. And so they're going to be sharing as well for about 10 minutes or so. We'll have Q&A with them. So those questions, though, they're going to come from you. And so if you pull out your phone right now or at any point while you're hearing these speakers talk, you can go to slido.com or you can snap that QR code. But if you go to slido.com, if you're actually typing in the old-fashioned way, you're going to be prompted to put a hashtag or a keyword. You can put in Tech Forum, but I believe if you just snap that QR code, it'll take you right there. Then you can put in your questions. If you see a question that's already on there that you really like, you can like that question and it bumps it up. And then when we get to that Q&A time, we will try to get through as many of those as we can. So I'm grateful that you're here tonight. It's going to be a good night. And let's get to our first speaker.
So there's a question that we all wrestle with as followers of Christ. It's this: how do we engage our culture, the world around us? Or to put it another way, what does it look like to be in the world, but not of it? And the answer to that question influences everything from how we choose to live our lives day in and day out, how we engage our neighbors, and ultimately how we show up in the world. But it seems even more complicated today, doesn't it? I mean, how do we live in the world but not of the world in a time when our lives are so intertwined and influenced by technology? The Bible doesn't specifically talk a lot about the automation of self-driving cars or human-machine interactions or artificial intelligence. So this is actually a question about Christian ethics. And while the Bible doesn't talk about machine learning, it does talk a lot about how we as followers of Christ should engage the world. Our highest ethical duty is to love God and love our neighbors as ourselves. We're not only called to live our lives well, but to serve others, to be a blessing to others, and ultimately to point them back to Christ. So when it comes to the topic of technology, I have a really unique vantage point. And to prove how much of a nerd I am, I can tell you I've worked at NASA for over 20 years, and specifically in the field of technology. So I'm privileged to spend most of my days not only thinking about technology, but creating it so that one day we can advance as a human civilization to live off planet, on the moon or Mars. I mean, I think about how we'll augment our physical reality using heads-up displays and data overlays embedded in future spacesuits. I think about how astronauts will use lunar regolith to build habitats on the moon that are radiation-proof to survive the harsh interstellar environments. And I might even know where we keep the aliens. So in addition to my day job, though, I'm even more passionate about working alongside ministry leaders in local churches and ministries like Wycliffe Bible Translators or Campus Crusade for Christ to help them figure out how to navigate this uncertain world and build a better future. And this all has to do with how we use technology to reach people. So my unique vantage point has helped me realize that our struggle with technology is not a new conversation. I mean, this is a debate that's older than the printing press, electricity, the internet. It's old. The debate is as old as the debate about how we engage our culture. And it's a debate specifically because technology, it can excite our soul, but it can also frighten us with its seemingly endless possibilities and unpredictable outcomes. So I get asked really regularly about what Christians should do with technology and innovation in general. And the questions come in many forms, often like, hey, Nick, what do you and Krista do to limit your kids' screen time? Or, hey, Nick, can you help me build a better church website? Or, Nick, is it okay if I post photos and then tag my friends on Facebook? Or, Nick, what would it look like for a robot to be considered human? Or a human to be considered robot? And what does that even mean for my salvation? And so for almost every question I get, I like to explain it like this. Technology in itself is not good or bad. It's not good or evil. It's simply a reality of the world we live in. And just as we can use money for selfish and selfless ends, technology has no moral value by itself. Nowhere in Scripture do we see the tools of technology being condemned for being evil or bad. It's the humans who are sinful and broken and sometimes act in evil ways. And of course, we're all using technology today, whether we like it or not, whether we realize it or not. Technology is really any advance in human creativity and ingenuity. And we have a tendency to think about it in terms of social media because, for many of us, that's what's most present in our lives. But let's not forget, technology is so much more than just digital social media, right? It's the rockets, it's the bridges, it's the wheel. It's even the paper scrolls that Jesus himself used to read the words of Isaiah 2,000 years ago. So for many, technology feels like this invisible force, kind of like the wind. And we can all sense its outsized impact on our lives. For some, it's a breeze in our sails. And for others, it's the gusts that keep blowing us over. But what matters when we think about technology and this invisible force is how we choose to react or respond. So let me give you an example. Who here has experienced the disruptive force that is a hurricane? Anyone? Right, almost all of us, right? We live in Houston. Do you remember what it's like? I can describe the last hurricane that I experienced like this. I knew the storm was coming thanks to the satellites and the forecasting algorithms and all the experts on social media. And at first, maybe like you, I underestimated the storm. I underestimated the impact it would have. But as the storm approached, I became increasingly aware that it might have an outsized impact on my life. It might change the trajectory of where I will go. So I frantically started to prepare. I bought all the water and all the toilet paper I could get my hands on. Then I went to the hardware store, got the last piece of plywood, no matter what the cost, boarded up the windows. Some of you evacuated if you had a place to go, but for the rest of us, we waited. We waited for the wind. And for those of us who have experienced hurricane force winds, we know that even with our best attempts and all the knowledge and technology we have, the winds are still unpredictable and uncontrollable. The winds themselves, again, they're not good or bad, but they can, of course, cause flooding and erosion. They can launch projectiles. They can decimate entire cities. But just as the wind can erode a mountain over time, it can also transform them into new landforms. And if you think about it, the invisible force of technology is doing just that with us. It's shaping us, our communities, our churches today in significant ways, whether we like it or not. And we're all aware of this, right? We live in this world. We feel the chaos swirling around us. We see the change. We know it's coming. We can literally feel its presence. So what do we do about it? Well, consider Clear Creek's experience living through Hurricane Harvey. I mean, for me, it was one of the most memorable experiences in the life of Clear Creek Community Church. Not because of the record-breaking destruction, not because of even how it changed the trajectory of the lives of so many, but simply because of how Clear Creek responded. If you remember, the first 3 days after Hurricane Harvey, most everyone in our area was completely paralyzed. Floodwaters made it nearly impossible for anyone to get around. Businesses were closed, and most organizations couldn't respond. Yet, there was Clear Creek Community Church. We did not waste the moment. We simply borrowed kayaks and we started rowing. We didn't understand this invisible force. We simply knew we had to show up. And one of the most memorable lines of that time in our church history was this: hashtag, don't waste your hurricane. And we didn't. Because of Hurricane Harvey, new doors were opened, we lived out our mission, and we loved our neighbors well. Hurricanes come and go, but technology is so intertwined into the very fabric of our lives today. It's foundational to how we interact with the world. So no longer is it sufficient for us to ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist, nor should we fully accept it and celebrate it without criticism. So Nick, what do we do? What do we do with this middle ground? What must we specifically as followers of Christ do when we're wrestling with these complex ethical issues of technology? Well, let me tell you two things. First, let's just admit that when it comes to technology itself, we just don't understand it well. It's an unknown, invisible force, and we're not the experts. But that doesn't mean we should be afraid of it or ignore it. And honestly, if we're being honest with ourselves, for some of us, we may still be doing just that, denying that this is even an invisible force that's shaping our world or having an impact on us. We might be unrealistically ignoring it. For others, we're keenly aware of the storm. We know it's coming, and we've even started to prepare, but it feels like mass chaos, and all the toilet paper is sold out. For others, we're simply borrowing kayaks and beginning to knock on doors because we don't want to waste our hurricane, but we just wish there was more people knocking on the doors with us. Next, let's take stock of our own hearts, our assumptions, and our attitudes when it comes to technology. Let's think about what's holding us back from using technology to love our friends and neighbors well. We all probably have some assumptions about technology that we just need to let go of so God can start to work through us. Some of you here today could be influencers and transformers of this world thanks to technology. Some of you could be the creators. You could be writing the code and the algorithms that are ushering in the future. We all have an important role to play, but one thing is for sure. Technology is part of the story that God has planned for all of our lives. So I'll end this talk on technology and Christian ethics with a simple observation. How many of you have been on a mission trip before? Anyone? Maybe you've joined us on a trip to Cuba or Honduras or Ukraine. So here's my observation. I believe that the biggest mission field that exists in the world today is nowhere in the physical world. I think it's the digital world, the place that our kids are growing up in, the world that many of ourselves find ourselves immersed in more and more without even really knowing it. I mean, think about it. For many in the world today, a growing percentage of our lives are simply lived out online in this digital world. But where are the Christians who are boldly professing their faith and transforming their culture in this digital world? And if Christians aren't there and not present in these issues, you can be certain that someone else will fill that void. In fact, they already have. And if we're not able to use our own influence to develop and use technology, who are we even to critique how it's negatively impacting our lives or inconveniencing us on a daily basis? If we don't use our influence to access the hearts and lives of people online, somebody will. So Corrie ten Boom wisely said, "Never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God." The future might be filled with artificially intelligent robotic superhumans who are walking through our campuses on a Sunday morning, whether it's our physical or digital campuses. But I truly believe that we live in a time where the biggest opportunities to have an impact on the world are still ahead of us, specifically thanks to technology. So let's choose to trust in a known God and consider the opportunities we have to impact the lives of others that only this moment in history affords us. Let's choose to see technology as a gift from God, another tool that we can use to open the doors as we live out our cultural mandate in this world. Thank you.
So in February of 1993, I left the classroom as a teacher then to walk into the Clear Creek ISD Educational Center as the new supervisor of instructional technology. I was so excited because it was an exciting time. We were bringing email and the internet to schools. In fact, within 9 months or so, I was able to work with Apple Computer to put in the first internet server for this school district. And then a couple of months later, we put in a network 1200 baud modem in Creekside in their STS lab. Now, you may think, what in the heck is that? To us, it was fast. It had a wonderful sound. It made this sound that would go like that. So you know you were connected. Now, in my innocence, with my rose-colored glasses, I believed that this was going to be awesome. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I know what I wanted to see. I wanted to see in our classrooms these opportunities for students and teachers. I wanted to see them have access to knowledge and just a world out there that they may not have known about. But I didn't realize that there also lurked evil. Evil was out there, and inappropriate content and pornography and stuff, and I'm like, but why would you want to bring that to children? It was just unreal. But if you ever want to test anything out, just hand it to a junior high kid or a teenager, and they'll show you. And so there went my innocence. Now, in this new world of educational technology, we didn't block websites. We didn't have that opportunity to do that or the resources. What we did is teach teachers that they had to specifically give URLs or addresses to the students to go to it. Now, this is pre-Google, so we could watch what was going on, and we really were in tune. But wow, with the internet, content just began to double and multiply, the good content and the bad content. So fast forward 30 years and now, which is unbelievable to me, and now our schools are giving every kid, assigning them at least one device. And if they don't have internet at home, we're also handing to them a Wi-Fi connection so they can access the internet 24/7. Over these 30 years, laws and ethical beliefs have brought changes to our responsibilities towards students and their use of technology. Now, the first responsibility schools have is to protect against inappropriate content. Beginning in the year 2000, any school that receives any kind of federal funding, we had to implement an internet safety policy that also talked about our technology protection methods. We, in that policy, we are, not only do we outline that, but we are also told that we must tell parents about it annually. So every year when you register your students, you are saying whether you will allow your child to have access to the internet and that you are aware of our policy. Many of you probably skim over it and don't even really look at it, but it's usually called a responsible use policy. Also in that policy, it says that we're going to make best efforts to block or filter all inappropriate content, whatever matter or materials that may be harmful to our children. We have invested thousands of dollars in firewalls and in appliances to help us with that process. We have also connected we contract with filtering companies. We cannot do it, but they have a staff with hundreds on there that actually go through and look for websites, and they use search bots, and they look on the dark web, and they make lists for us for the blocking. Now, with the move toward online and remote learning during the COVID quarantine season, making sure our devices are safe for the internet, especially at home, has really been a challenge for us. We also are required to monitor online activities of minors, like in chat rooms and on social media. Now, most of our school districts will block those from students because it is difficult to do it. But we use a service called Social Sentinel, which goes out and actually scans all the different websites that are out there, social media, and they're primarily looking for things that might be harmful. They're looking for mentions of guns, of violence, or anything like that, and they let us know so that we are prepared and we can examine it to see if it's any of our children that are posting out there or anything that might be a threat to our schools. The most important thing that we do, I believe, is educate. We educate students and staff, and this has been outlined through an act called Protecting Children in the 21st Century. We must provide for educating minors about appropriate online behavior, including interacting with other individuals on social networking websites and in chat rooms. Our focus is not only in producing good citizens in our communities, but also producing good, responsible citizens online. Our second responsibility that we have is to protect student information or identity. Privacy of student records and personal information really is a hot topic right now because you hear so much about identity theft. From the time a child is born today, there is a digital footprint of that child which has been created by parents, by family, and by friends. It is our responsibility to do this together, to protect that data. That Social Security is so important. Right now on the dark web, a Social Security goes for $4. And with a Social Security and with the child's name, they can take that, what we call cyber attackers or cyber actors, they can take that and create fake driver's license, they can apply for credit, which can really mess up a child that is 5 or 6, and then at 18 when they come out, it will create problems like that. So again, what's our foremost is that we educate. We educate our staff members about their roles in protecting your child's data. We also implement policies and rules to limit access to student records and personal information, and that's by FERPA. So not only do you sign up for whether they have access to internet, at the beginning of the year, parents, you are agreeing to what information we can share. You make the choice whether we can share photos on the yearbook, in the yearbook, on a website, in a newspaper, or with others. And for us, it can be a real struggle because we know that we have to make sure we have double-checked to make sure that whether we have permission to do this. But as students start to seek recognition, as they are trying to make advancement for colleges, scholarships, athletics, those kind of things, then we are struggling with giving them the recognition they need to make that advancement, but also to how we protect them from predators. The third way that we protect student information is picking web-based applications that your students are using for learning. And we try to pick those that are providers that are adhere to certain requirements that they have, especially for those students under 13. We work with them to modify our verbiage so that we know what they're doing with the data about your child, and that how they're storing it, how they're keeping it, how they're protecting it, and then how they give it back to us so we have control. Now, the third and last responsibility that we have is to protect students from each other online. In September of 2017, David's Law was implemented, and it's named for a student that committed suicide after being a victim of extreme cyberbullying, and which actually began in school. So that law gave several regulations that pertain to schools on how we implement it. The first regulation is that we educate students on cyberbullying. What is it? What does it look like? How do you prevent from it? And how do you keep from doing it? So that is, to me, our best defense. Our second one is that we have to provide an anonymous way for students to report these kinds of incidents, as well as concerns they may have about drugs, weapons, threats, or abuse. We use anonymous alerts, so does Clear Creek ISD, Friendswood, Dickinson, and it's very popular. Now, before we implemented it in 2017, we had 4 student deaths in Deer Park. I work for Deer Park now. We had 4 students' deaths. 3 of them were from suicide. Since implementing it, we've had no suicides. Because what happens when a student reports that they are being cyberbullied or they're thinking about suicide or anything along that line, if they do not report their name so that we can get to them and assist them, my team goes into action. It's kind of like CSI, and I get a little excited about what they can actually do, and they go in, and with 10 minutes, they know who that child is. They can identify them. We can contact an administrator or a counselor to get them assistance. Now, if they're at home when that happens, we can get the GPS coordinates, and we can connect with the police, and they will make the house visits or figure out the home, and we can get them assistance. And to me, that's so important that we are protecting our children. Now, is all of this foolproof or perfect? No. Some days it's like a moving target, and we're all over them. But I would like to share with you what you can do as a parent to help us. Partner with us, all right? Just be a partner with us, with the schools. All the schools in this area have a campaign called Say Something. So if you hear or see of any kind of harm about students online, then we ask you to report it. You have access to anonymous alerts on the school's website, and you can report that so that we can get them the assistance that is needed. The second thing is educate yourself. Find out more about digital citizenship and how you can work with your students on that. One of my favorite sites is called Common Sense Media, and I'm fortunate enough to be part of an advisor group. And there's a whole section on what parents need to know. We also utilize that content in our training with our teachers and our students on digital citizenship. They are very conscientious about listening to us. The third suggestion I have for you is to set some home rules, some rules about how technology is used, like green time as opposed to screen time. And Matthew's behind me is going to talk a little bit about it. The fourth suggestion I have for you is when you give your child a personal cell phone and you provide it, set up those privacy rules. You go in and set it up so you know how your child is protected. Because we at schools, we cannot set up we'll set up our devices, but we don't do yours. And then there are 2 tools that I recommend, other parents have recommended to me. One is called Life 360. It will track your children, but nice thing is, it'll also tell you how fast they're driving, good or bad. The other tool I recommend is called Bark, which will monitor text messages, social media, and other places, social media, and just looking for potential safety concerns for you. So my final word is, as we continue to educate students, staff, parents, and implement the affordable tools that allow us to block, filter, and monitor activities, I promise you we will do our best to protect your children. Remember, we are partners together in developing tomorrow's future.
Hello, my name is Matthew Neighbors. I am a middle school principal. I'm also the parent of 2 teenage daughters, so both those roles inform my understanding of children and how they relate to their teens and children in technology. From my vantage point, I get to watch hundreds of parents each year try to navigate this invisible force called technology that seems to be sweeping through this generation. And monitoring technology really is something we almost have to do now, beginning when a baby learns how to walk. They find a tablet in the house and it entertains them, or they start watching a screen in the back of a headrest. We're happy when it entertains them or keeps them from hitting their sibling in the back seat. Then they transition to a TV, and almost immediately we have to start asking ourselves, how much screen time is too much? They will go to gaming devices, but the technological marvel which surpasses all these, well, of course, is this, the cell phone, more aptly termed the portable computer. If Sesame Street is learning to walk and Disney movies are a tricycle, then I would say the Nintendo Switch is probably a bike. But this is the sports car you get when you turn 16. Yeah, if you're a kid, you've arrived. A lot of parents stress about what is the right age to first give their child a cell phone. Now, I don't have a definitive answer, but I can tell you that about half of our 5th grade students and about 90% of our 6th graders have cell phones. So that means at about the age of 11 or 12 is when most parents break down. A lot of times it's because of the pressure of their friends getting phones, but you'll eventually get them a phone for either a birthday or a Christmas present. And I don't see a lot of parents trying to buy the oldest version that they can. Instead, they're buying the top-of-the-line products for their kids. It's not like you're getting them an old pickup truck for their first ride. And don't think that just because you're buying them an old Samsung or an iPhone 8 instead of 11, that you're buying them the grandma's old car for their first vehicle. You're really just giving them a used sports car. And that's a lot of power in the hands of an 11 or 12-year-old. When something goes awry, well, that's usually when they end up in my office in a scenario something like this. A teacher's giving a test. The room is completely quiet. Suddenly, backpacks start buzzing and vibrating all over the place. Kids are frantically grabbing into their backpacks. Most of them are shutting them off, but if you start reading text messages and texting back, it just causes a huge disruption. So a few minutes later, I'm in my conference room staring at 7 6th grade girls. They are yelling at one another, arguing, complaining. I'm sure there were a few tears. By the time the dust settled, this is what I had discovered. One of the young ladies had found a TikTok star from Canada online, and she had begun messaging this person. She soon realized that she wasn't certain her parents would approve, so then when she would come to school, she would borrow her friends' cell phones and start messaging this same online person. After a few months, this person gathered all of those numbers that they had been contacted with and put them into a group message and started putting them on blast. So in the middle of this test, they started receiving all these messages at once. They were pretty ugly and pretty vile. By the time I got to read them, I didn't see the word "a" in any of the messages, so I'm pretty sure this person was not from Canada. So what is a parent to do? One principle I believe is true is this idea of earned autonomy. Let's use the analogy of learning how to drive. Remember the 2 teenage daughters? So before we put somebody in a car, we first give them a knowledge test. Do they understand the rules of the road? Do they know what 2 yellow lines mean, or do they recognize a yield sign? After that, they get a permit. Now, with a permit, that means they get to start learning how to drive in the parking lot, or in the church's parking lot. It means that you may take them to a driving school. Remember when you were learning how to drive and the driving instructor had a brake on their side of the vehicle? If you got out of control, they would literally stop the car. After that, you might have to take a really stressful test with a DPS officer, or maybe someone else now, and you actually get a license. But even then, there are still restrictions. You're not going to be able to have another passenger in the vehicle until you're 18. Unless you have a stamp on the back of your car that says student or new driver, which is a good idea, by the way, no one else on the road knows how old you are. Think about that for a moment. When you're driving down the highway, you're noticing different vehicles. Are you thinking about how old the drivers are? No. Everyone on the road is going to get flipped off, cut off, bumped into, screeched by. I mean, you drive by someone and you have no clue how old that driver is. For a minute, that sounds a lot like surfing the internet. When you're gaming with someone, chatting with someone, or seeing something online, you really don't know how old the other person is. I mean, you guys don't really trust those profile pictures, do you? So for some reason, we don't seem to apply this same principle of earned autonomy to kids when we hand them the keys to the internet. At 11 or 12, they find themselves in possession of this powerful tool that can transport them almost anywhere in the world. But don't think that this push for independence and autonomy is something new. When I was 11 or 12, I used to leave home on a Huffy bicycle. Now, my mom would send me out of the house. 6 or 7 hours later, I would show back up at home for dinner time. Mom looks at me. He's alive. I didn't get a call from the police. Mission accomplished. Back then, parental monitoring was sending my younger brother along with me. But he couldn't ride as fast as I could, so I could lose him. Today, parents do the same things, except now, instead of sending them out on their bicycles, which we don't consider safe, we send them off to their bedroom with a device, gaming or their phone or a TV, and they're gone for hours. Then maybe they show back up for dinner and we nod our approval. Now, every once in a while, you may nag at them to clean their rooms or encourage them to get out more, but invariably, they end up in front of a screen way more than we would appreciate. And so, what do? We're confused, and so we end up bringing our spouse to a parent and technology conference when we could be out eating dinner. What does this world come to? But one of the reasons I think we're all here is because no one resource, no one person can answer this key question for us. How much technology access is too much for my child? It's a hard question, and it really boils down a little bit to some of these questions you might have to ask. How responsible is my kid? How mature are they? What about how do they relate with their friends in technology? And then, do you trust them? Let's say, for example, that you have a family rule that all the devices are put into the kitchen to recharge at night. Do you trust that your child is not going to sneak out of the room to check on their device once you go to bed? That word trust is important. Your children are going to try to convince you that trust is the same as freedom, and distrust means oversight. So they're going to tell you that if you monitor them, if you hold them accountable, if you watch over them, if you put them on Life 360, that means you don't trust them. And they're going to tell you that if you just let them do whatever they want to do, that shows you that you trust them. Just let me go and let me be free. But we as parents have to reframe that discussion because that's not true. A true trusting relationship has transparency, and secrecy builds distrust. So let me explain. When I'm pulling out of the driveway, I tell my spouse where I'm going, how long I'm going to be gone, and what I'm going to be doing once I leave the driveway. I have just trained 2 young girls how to drive. And so when they pull out of that driveway, I've had to realize that they can go wherever they want to go. I mean, I can tell them, they can tell me, but at some point they have a little bit of independence. And I have to learn to trust that they're going to be responsible. But if I was to consistently leave my house and my vehicle and not tell my spouse where I'm going, or how long I'm going to be gone, or what I'm doing while I'm away, I mean, obviously that's going to build a lot of distrust. So a mature relationship is one that's built on mutual trust and transparency. And so we have to help our children understand that. Young people also today want to know, why are you talking to me? Think about that for a minute. The internet wasn't around when you were a kid. So when you asked your dad what kind of animals live in Alaska, he could make up any answer and you'd have to believe him. But now they can just Google it. If they want to know how to fix something around the house, they don't need you. There's a YouTube video for that. Now, we as parents, we really want to speak into the lives of our children, but they're asking themselves, why are you talking to me? And yet we want them to trust us. They will begin to assert more and more independence and challenge your rationale for making any and every decision, including any limitations you might be placing on their access to technology. So one way to explain it to them might be to use this driving analogy, this earned autonomy over time. In the beginning, there should be lots of oversight and lots of restrictions. As a parent, utilize the power of technology in your favor. You should be monitoring their group chats and their text messages. Think about you as an adult. When you have to CC your boss on an email, do you change the language and how you're writing that? Your kids, too, will change how they communicate with one another if they know that the parent is reading it. As they get to high school, maybe they add a social media account. You should follow it. And there shouldn't be any fake or hidden accounts. If a driver's license can get pulled for egregious or repeated violations, the same could happen for a device. Overall, your child is only going to be under your care in possession of a cell phone, if they get one at age 11 or 12, for about 6 to 7 years. If your child knows that you have a plan and that they can earn more autonomy and independence and trust over time, then they may be more willing to go along with the current restrictions. Honestly, most kids quietly appreciate you setting boundaries for them. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to push against those boundaries at every step of the way. Remember, we drive as close to the speed limit as we can, right? Let's go back to the 6th grade classroom for just a moment. That young girl was sitting there messaging this unknown person online. It was like there was this battle between this angel and devil on her shoulders, which is really just a symbol of this internal struggle between sin and obedience, which plays itself out in our lives too. Technology is just one area where that happens. Yes, your relationship with technology as a parent also matters. Your kids will point out any discrepancies that they see in how you handle technology and the restrictions that you place on them. Trust me, once they take those driving courses, they're going to watch how you drive a lot more closely. So the big takeaways for parents are this. Don't give your child too much too soon. Plan for a glide path of earned autonomy over time, and be a role model in your own healthy relationships when it comes to technology. If you do, when they pull out of the driveway and onto the internet, they'll do so responsibly. Thank you.
Okay, let's give these guys a hand, all three of them. They were so great. I'm so thankful for their expertise and the time they spent just getting ready and just sharing their gifts with us. So good. Okay, so I'm also thankful for your questions. We have really good questions, and I'm just going to get to it as quickly as I can. So I'm Rachel Chester. I help Ryan with Clear Creek Resources. I help host our podcast, and I'm just thankful that we have this opportunity to just get together and talk about these things that affect our faith so much. There's so much to talk about. So let's get to some of it. Okay, Matthew, I'm going to start with you. He sat all the way over there because he didn't want me to do that, but I am. I'm going to combine a couple of these questions because I think that we can. So you talked a lot about focusing on your kids with their technology. But what about your kids' friends? So when it comes to your kids' friends, how do you monitor what they're doing on their phones when they're in your home? And what about when you have stricter rules than your kids' friends? I mean, then what do you do? How do you deal with that? And you guys can jump in too.
Aren't you a parent, Nick?
No, these are all his questions.
I think that, so one thing that was also important for us that I didn't really have time to mention in the talk is it's important to connect with other parents when you're trying to take your kids through this phase of their lives where they're going to have a cell phone, because the apps and the issues that you're going to face change so rapidly, there really is sort of this sweet spot that is kind of unique to each generation. So I know for us, it was our small group and just kind of going through those parents in that phase of life and just sort of bouncing ideas off of one another and finding out what struggles each of us face, because sometimes the struggles are even different depending on the gender of your child. But I would think that, a lot of times, again, it's not a new struggle. Anytime your kid used to have a sleepover, you would worry about, is this other family going to show a movie that we don't find appropriate or something like that. So I think just having some honest conversations with other families before your kids spend the night or do sleepovers, but know that they're going to see it when they're at school. So it really is a matter of coaching them and teaching them how to respond appropriately. If you start to see someone show you an inappropriate video, what are you going to do? Are you going to linger? Are you going to watch it? Or are you going to turn away and say, I don't want to see that? Kind of walk them through and kind of role model and do some scenarios with them and help role play for them things that you know are going to happen.
Nick, you are a parent.
Yeah, I mean,
Harry,
I'll add what
you
Chris,
are, and you have grandkids too.
what Chris and I have done is, we talked about this invisible force of technology. It's going to feel overwhelming, right? So what do you do with it? Well, you just show up, you be present. And so our kids are still younger, so we have a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 4-year-old. We just put the TV in the middle of our living room. It was kind of annoying at first because you can only watch so many YouTube videos on repeat from the Minecraft guys. But that way, when my kids are talking to the other kids, we're there. We see, like Matthew was saying, we see what's happening. And it happened to us where one of our oldest kid, Asher, had somebody reach out to him. It's a multi-online player type thing, and some random avatar, which I'm pretty sure wasn't the real avatar, reached out. And we're like, whoa, not okay. And let's tell you why, and let's talk through this. And so simply just by being there in the conversation, we had, at an early stage anyway, we had an opportunity to be part of that conversation.
So lots of communication and conversations. So Nick, I think this question is for you, but again, anybody who wants to jump in, please do. So why does it matter? So with NASA, with Google, what are really the effects of having Christians involved in those programs? How does their faith really affect what their jobs look like in those spaces?
Yeah, so I'll actually answer this question the other way. What happens when we're not? So who has an Amazon Alexa in their living room? Wow, that's a lot of you, right? Was that did you do that intentionally? I mean, maybe, or someone gave it to you as a Christmas present. Well, what happens when your 10-year-old kid, who, by the way, is no longer asking you the questions, as Matthew pointed out, goes to Alexa for those answers? And, at first it's like, hey, what time is it? Or set a timer for me, or like, what's the temperature outside? Or how tall is a giraffe? But those questions get more mature. And what happens is that technology is answering the questions just like a human relationship would. And so like, is Alexa human, right? And what happens when they start asking theological questions? Like, who is Jesus? And Alexa, who by this time, they've had a 5-year relationship with Alexa, and Alexa answers that pretty definitively. Do you even know what Alexa says? Are you okay with that? Who programmed Alexa's response? So it is so critical for Christians to be not only using the technology, but building it, being in the room at Amazon when they were programming the algorithms, or at least developing the machine learning algorithms, which is values-based, right? There's ethics behind this. Somebody is deciding what right and wrong is, what truth and not truth is. And I tell you, there are not enough Christians in the world doing this. I mean, I've tried to build a list of 100 Christian technologist influencers who are in the big companies building this, and I can't do it. I can't come to 100. But think about the army of technologists who are out there making these decisions. And it starts to get kind of scary, honestly. So like, where are we? We need to rise up as a generation and be present. And that goes for any technology. I mean, NASA, I work at NASA and I get to work in technology, so I get to be in the room when we talk about decisions about lunar bases and technology we're building and crews and all those things. And does my Christian worldview influence my answers? Absolutely it does. I mean, I want to. What am I there for in the first place?
I think we set boundaries. We provide those boundaries and that look at what's ethical. And we bring those ethics back because of our Christian view and our Christian beliefs, and making others accountable by adding that in the technology.
Yeah,
world.
because at NASA oftentimes, and we just did, Faith and Science series. I mean, that was such an amazing series in our church. It wasn't called that. I forget what it was called, but it was the Science series,
it
right?
was,
So
actually.
one of the questions comes up all the time at work at NASA is like, what do you actually believe? Like, where are you placing your trust? Is that in science, which is really just a process to question itself, right, and to advance itself? And so, like, if you're not in the room with that Christian worldview and that ethical response, people who just don't even know what they believe and where they're placing their truth are making these decisions. So just being present matters.
That's really helpful. Thank you. So, Carrie and Matthew, this one's for you. How much privacy do our children, how much do they really get? How much do they need? I mean, is it really fair to really expect to see what's happening on their phones?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yes, because as Matthew shared earlier, it's our job as parents to provide that guidance and leadership. Also, not only are you looking at what they're doing, you're looking at their friends. And you are there to assess and teach them how to decide if this is a friend that they should be communicating with. And what should their response be as a Christian to their friends that may be sending them inappropriate material, or just talking, how are they talking to each other?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's two steps here. You check content. You can use filters and things to do that, and making sure that, the games that they're playing are appropriate. But you have to chaperone your child. It's two separate things. There's content and there's behavior. And really what you're trying to do is train your kid to have healthy behaviors and how they relate to technology, because, we as adults find times when we need to maybe fast from social media for a time, or you realize that you're just, you've all of a sudden wasted several hours online, and you're like, whoa, I've got things I need to do. So think about how we learn to self-correct, and we've got to build those skills in our kids.
Do either one of you think that the schools are really equipped to handle some of these questions? So when it comes to bullying, or ethics, should it be the school's job? Can they handle it? And then along the same lines, how can the schools and parents help to not only deal with bullying when it happens, but then prevent it?
Yeah, I would say that, especially in middle school, student conflict and drama is very common, and it's a lot of it does happen online. And because of that, because it's happening in a space a lot of times outside of the school's purview, when it happens on their phones, it's not really under our domain, but we have to deal with it when they bring it into the school. When that drama comes into the school and it's affecting relationships in the campus, then we can step into that. And that's 90% of the conversations that I have with parents. It's something has happened online, and the parents are now in my office, and we're having to navigate that. And again, it goes back to just finding your kids and helping them monitor their behavior online. It's really about behavior and about how do you respond when someone says something mean to you? Do you continue to engage? Do you block them? And a lot of the kids, they don't want to be left out, the fear of missing out, FOMO. So they'll engage with people who are treating them poorly. And think about that. Sometimes that happens in real life too. Sometimes people maintain relationships with other people who mistreat them. So how do we build that resiliency in our kids?
You asked whether it should be our job. Really, we should be partnering with you, and it should be together. But as we know, there are some parents that aren't doing it. So therefore, it has become our job in protecting our kids and teaching them about cyberbullying and about looking at what's right. We are required to teach digital citizenship because it's not happening at homes. But the most effective way is when you partner with us, when you are speaking Christian values into how they're using technology, and we're doing what's required by law.
Okay, let me ask this. Probably this is for Nick. Outside of social media, which, just so you guys know, we are actually going to specifically work through some social media talks and questions in the second half. So if you put in a social media question, and we're not asking it. We're going to get there, so don't worry. But outside of social media and outside of virtual church, what are some creative ways that we can use technology to minister to the world, to reach people?
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time recently thinking about this. I think there's content and there's the platforms. So Clear Creek Resources is a really good example of what we're doing to take content that you might see on a Sunday here and sharing it with the world. And that's a really great use of it. And there's some really cool things going on in this space. For example, content-wise, I don't know if you guys have seen The Chosen. It's really popular right now. It's kind of a short film series, kind of like Netflix style, about the life of Jesus. And it's really kind of a modern take on like the old Jesus film from the Crew folks. I mean, it's really, really powerful. Platform-wise, there's a lot that we can do around using platforms like social media and other things to share our content. There's a big debate, like, should we own the platform? Do we have to do it all ourselves? Does there have to be like a Christian version of Facebook? And I think the answer is just use Facebook. They have way more money than we do anyway as a church to build a Facebook. So let's just use Facebook to share our content. But there might be some opportunities to create our own platforms to share the message. And I think there's some really interesting things that ministries are doing. So if you guys are familiar with Compassion International, you can adopt a child or support a child. Oftentimes the big disconnect there for them is getting suburb white American dude to understand what's going on in another part of the world because we kind of just, it's not in our bubble of awareness. So what they've done is used like augmented reality, and you can go and experience this transformational thing where you really build empathy, and they're using technology to do that. So I think there is a lot of possible applications, and I like to explain it simply by what ministry and what church are we trying to do, and what could that look like in a digital world? We don't have to call it digital ministry or digital church. We just call it church. We just happen to be doing it online. And where are there opportunities? For us at Clear Creek, I think about the major ministries we have. So student ministry, for example, what could we be doing? What could we be doing with all these challenges that Carrie and Matthew have so eloquently talked about? Like, where are we? Like, let's be Clear Creek Community Church in our 4B area online so that we can address bullying, we can address putting good content out there, so that instead of, looking at Canadian social media influencers, they're looking at our student pastors that are online. So we can talk about this for a long time.
Nick could talk about this for a long time. I don't know if we could.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys one more question before we move to a break. When I hear you guys working through not only your talks but answering these questions, I'm hearing a lot about, we could just use Facebook, and it's really about talking and communicating with your kids, and what are you doing with technology? So I'm hearing you talk a lot about your own character and who you are as Christians and disciples of Jesus in these spaces, whether it's school or online or in these different types of places. So y'all tell me, why does it matter for you to be a follower of Jesus? How does your relationship with him affect how you think about your role in these spaces? Matthew.
Yeah, we'll start here and move that. So let's start with just grace and forgiveness, right? Your kids are not going to be perfect online. They're going to make mistakes. Like the girl that I mentioned, she knew her parents didn't approve. She knew it was wrong. So make sure that you understand that you have to coach your kids through those situations, help grow them through those situations, because God does the same with us. He forgives us. He shows us grace. He forgives our sins, and our kids are going to mess up. So don't feel bad if you feel like you've messed up and haven't monitored well enough. You probably haven't. If your kids have messed up, they probably have, right? We're humans, and we're going to make mistakes in this arena just like we do in any other arena. And so again, that's where being a Christian helps, is let's show our kids forgiveness and grace just like God has shown to us.
And I find being a Christian in the world that I'm in is important because I can set the boundaries. We have requests for websites to be open. I'm the conservative Christian view of, and my staff actually will bring those requests that we have to me, and I will investigate and kind of allowed to give that ruling. The other thing that I do is every time we get an anonymous alert or something that's happening to kids online, I stop and pray for them. So I think it's our prayer life that we show. Also modeling that appropriate behavior through emails and communication with students and my social presence or my digital presence online. So they can see, they may not see it in their home, but they can see it by an administrator or a teacher, how they're doing it.
Yeah, I would just add, if our highest ethical duty is to love God and love our neighbors well, to serve them, and we're trying to, make fully devoted followers of Christ, and we have our top 5 list, for example, just think about the places where they are living their lives, and both physical and digital, and simply be present. You wouldn't expect your top 5 list to come to your house all the time, unless maybe they're in your small group, to talk to you. You're probably going to go meet them at the baseball field or meet them for coffee or the tattoo parlor. I don't know, wherever they're at. You're going to go to them. So it's the same thing online. Where are they? And let's be present. Let's just be Christians in the world, showing them the love of Christ.
Thank you so much. Okay, so that was awesome. I hope you guys heard as much wisdom and conviction as I did already in this first half. We're going to take an 8-minute break, and we're all going to be back here at 8:10, because I know you can do it, because there's so much more to come. We're going to focus on social media in the second half, and it's going to be really great. So think about your social media questions, and we'll be back at 8:10. Thanks so much.
Well, hey guys, my name's Sarah Vanderweel. I think it really goes without saying that phones are essential for Gen Z. I feel like you're like, oh, duh, right? But why? Because of the information and communication that it relationally supplies for them. See, we're similar, a lot of us, but in the realm of social media, it's different. So I feel like one of the first things you have to learn is stop thinking what do I do? Because they don't do what we do. They don't even function the same way. They're not like, oh, grandma moved away and I want to catch up with what her stuff's about, Signed grandma. My mom does. My grandma does that. It's great. But they would really say that social media provides this avenue to always feel connected. They'd say it's life, And so first I want to talk about some of the dangers with that, because inherently there are. It's social media, right? So one of the first ones is the influence. So Gen Zers tend to use up to 5 different social channels per day. And 44% check their social medias every hour. So that's a lot of information they're going through. And if we're not careful, that could be one of the primary voices in the life of your Gen Zer. Second is the filter bubble. So thanks to these algorithms, users see more of what it seems they want to see and what they show interest in, which sounds like a great idea, right? But it traps us into this narrowed perspective. So they think social media is expanding your worldview, I'm getting to see everything and more of everything, but it's actually filtering it into only those things that you've really shown interest in. And so it's making it align a little bit. So we post things using specific hashtags. So you may know what a hashtag is, but it's the # followed by whatever the content is. And you're very likely to get a lot of likes, a lot of attaboys, pats on the back, not many people disagreeing. And the reason is because the people seeing it are the ones who already show interest in that content. So I think of puppies. If I'm looking at pictures of puppies and cute puppies all the time, they're going to pop up a lot more throughout my entire feed, because that wouldn't be a bad thing, but you can see how that could be a problem later down the line, right? So next is correct engagement. So there's this heavy pressure to engage correctly and to know what's going on for fear of being canceled. So it's called cancel culture. So it's a big thing with Gen Z. It's if you say or do something possibly or even mistakenly offensive, you get canceled. So you get unfollowed, cut off, made fun of, trashed throughout the internet, and possibly in person as well. So an example, during quarantine, the Black Lives Matter movement rushed in, dominating everyone's feed. They threw out a hashtag Blackout Tuesday, so you're supposed to post a black box in support. There was pressure to participate and repercussions if you didn't, regardless of where you landed. So next, comparison. So comparison is still at play, but it's kind of redefined a little bit differently than what we'd think. It's like kind of everyone else's lives, they look so much better, they look happier, like they look more put together, they're giving to all these organizations, like they're involved in so much more, they're talented, like, and so on and so on. It's a big reason why anxiety and depression are so prevalent among this generation. Like they're comparing, but they're also taking in a world of true and false information about politics, family, beliefs, what's acceptable, every time they jump on their phone, which again, like I said, it's a lot, it's a whole lot. It's overwhelming, and it's a big reason their humor is really dark. Like, I don't know if you've seen any memes or things they post and you're like, that like rubs me wrong, right? Like they're getting so much information, taking in so much that they don't know how to process it all, so they say we gotta make fun of it because it's the only way to cope with it. So, dangers aside, what are they using? What are the apps? We'll get into the real thing I'm sure y'all are here for. See, because I can tell you one thing, like, it's not Facebook. And why? You're there. They don't want to be there because you're there. Like, that seems completely pointless, right? They want to be, elsewhere, do their own thing, pave your own way, right? So, let's talk about them. Snapchat. They're very into visual media. So Snapchat is a picture messaging app, but it also allows texting, video calls, and phone calls. It's taken the place of normal texting. It pretty much all the apps that we have on our phone, like that are automatically there, like they don't need to use them because they can just do it all through Snapchat. Gen Z rarely even shares each other's phone numbers because all their communication can take place in the app. Like my 19-year-old was like, oh, I don't even have my old small group leader's number. Like, no, we just messaged. I was like, through what? Okay, cool. You should probably have their phone number. That just feels right. I don't know. But you're able to send these pictures and can add stickers and text and filters to your pictures, letting you just be creative as you message. And you share stories about your day. Like, all of these things are allowing them to stay in these constant communication. So one thing about Snapchat is their messages disappear after they're opened. It gives this illusion of privacy, which is made even more so by, there's a feature under photos in Snapchat that's called My Eyes Only. Then you have to have another passcode in order to get into that part of Snapchat. So that can just lay for itself, right? All right, so there's also a story feature that you can share your day with your friends, or you can share it to the all stories of Snapchat. So anybody with Snapchat can see this story that's posted, and it'll show up on a Snap Map, which they're called snaps, by the way. I don't know if I explained that. So Snapchat, you send snaps. Makes a lot of sense. But there's a map, and it'll show where the hot spots of people, where they're posting and snapping from. So it'll show kind of where they think it's really cool, because you can see, like, oh, everyone's in Paris right now. That's cool, see where that is. All right, so almost 75% of Gen Z, they use Snapchat up to 6 times per day. So this is where they live. This is their hub. Next place is YouTube. So YouTube is a video hub. It's of user-generated content. So a lot of us have probably been to YouTube, used it ourselves for like trying to fix something, right? But they use it a little differently. The main place they use it for are to see influencers. So influencers are relatable people that are usually sharing vlogs, which are videos of their life, or random video-like challenges of some sort. So this is where they kind of see just a hub of life of some of the people who are just living normal life. So one of the first ones, I want to name some of the top influencers, and I put them up there because you're gonna be like, PewDiePie? That's his hashtag name, all right? So his name is PewDiePie. He is an online gamer. He has 109 million subscribers. Like, people just watch him play games. And like, they do it all the time. He's talking about his life while he does it, and people love him. All right, next is James Charles. He is a makeup artist. He has 25.5 million subscribers. And right now, cancel culture, he's canceled. He did something, and your kids probably know about it, so you should probably just ask them, because it's wild stuff. Next is the Little Brants. They're family vloggers, so they literally just have a cute little family, and they tell about their life and follow their life throughout it. And they have 13 million subscribers. Emma Chamberlain, she does vlogs, random video challenges. She has 10 million subscribers. And Cody Ko, he does reaction videos, his thoughts on things, like he sits there in front of a camera and just like talks to you. And like students, kids love it. There is millions of views, So they're informing our thoughts about things. So kids will sit there and just watch video after video after video because it keeps popping up with a new thing. And they get a lot of interesting stuff from it. All right, next, Instagram. So Instagram might be the one you're most familiar with of them. So Instagram is a social network using videos and pictures to post and message. So you can go through, you can post your own stuff, you use hashtags to kind of say what it's about, and then you follow interests and accounts that interest you. There's an Explore tab that shows you other content that you might be interested in. And note, like, they all kind of have an Explore, or they call it Discover tab, that you can't filter that content. That content is whatever you've kind of shown interest in. It'll give you other stuff that you're like, you might be interested in this, like follow. It's like an ad, kind of, a little bit, but for other influencers and whatnot. So it's kind of the main way. You can communicate by posting and commenting on your feed, on your story, but also by direct messaging. Again, like Snapchat, also like the text app, but that's not cool anymore, you know? Gen Z uses this for communication, but also, and this has been on the rise since COVID began, that they use it for their news source. Like, students are posting news articles, news things they've seen, and not really tracking necessarily where it came from, but it looks good, they're gonna share it, you know? And they get a lot of news from that. All right, next one, and it's the newbie to the group, it's TikTok. So users create and share entertaining 60-second videos. So a lot of them are like skits, challenges, informative videos, dances, and it really contrasts with the more polished feed of Instagram. So Instagram is kind of look your best. TikTok is normal, genuine people, relatable people even, are sharing their life in a more genuine form, and it's really, really influencing for them. This is where we see a lot of Gen Z dark humor, and a lot of that is because they're sharing quick videos and trying to be kind of witty, funny. And TikTok challenges, they're from dances to like eat something random or go try a pink drink at Starbucks, if you've heard of that. It was a TikTok challenge, and then a bunch of people started doing it. And I'm sure Starbucks loved that, you know? So there's a duet feature within TikTok. It's called Duet, where you can post your video and another video that's on there next to it, where you're like maybe doing the dance next to it or the challenge next to it, and you don't need any permission required. So a lot of people are just making fun of other people, sadly. So a lot of YouTubers will do reaction videos to these challenges. So all of these platforms kind of cross and share information. So you really got to keep up, because they're really talking about all of them across the board. These platforms are the way that Gen Z engages the world and each other. The majority of Gen Z uses social media to feel connected to the world, connected to one another, and informed about things. Many would say they feel bad about the amount of time that they spend on it, and they wish they spent less, and I'm sure a lot of us would feel the same in some ways. But they feel there's just no other way to keep up with the vast amount of information that's flooding just like a 15-minute scroll on Instagram or TikTok. Like, they get so much so quickly. They're info grazers. So they read headlines and memes and take in a lot very quickly, but on a very surface level. So I was like spitfire at you, you know, all these apps, right? So big thing here. Like, kids, they're still going outside, like they're still hanging out with their friends, right? But this social media has even shaped the way those interactions look like. Like, they are talking about what they've seen online. They're talking about these influencers. They're talking about these challenges. They're doing these challenges in order to post. They're taking pictures in order to post and send to get however many likes. And if you missed it, like, you can feel very outcasted. It's why they were saying, like, a lot of parents cave, because it's like, my kid's sitting in a circle and everyone's on their phone, and mine's like they don't know what to do. And it's funny, but it's heartbreaking to watch. And so they don't know how to get into it. And it's a tough place, and like I said, lines aren't black and white in it, but we get the opportunity to start conversations with students about these very topics, what they see, what they learn, what apps they use, and even how it shapes them. Because I'll be honest, like, you as the parent, you're probably not gonna find out about the newest thing first. Like, they will. And so if you haven't built that foundation of trust and openness, like, you're not gonna hear about it. But don't be afraid to get involved in their social media lives. Join them in it. Help them find balance, keep those lines of communication open, and don't be afraid to be the parent, because otherwise they'll make their own rules themselves. Awesome, thank y'all.
So for the last few years, my family has gone camping over spring break. One of our favorite family traditions is to sit by the campfire at night. There's something about campfire that just draws people in. It's warming, calming, and nourishing to the soul. But everybody knows that fire can also be dangerous. Professor and author Brené Brown says that social media is like fire. You can use it to keep yourself warm and nourished, or you can burn down the barn. It all depends on your intentions, your expectations, and your reality checking skills. This, I think, is a great description of social media. Now, there are certainly positive benefits to social media that I'm sure we've all experienced, like keeping in touch with our friends from far away, or growing deeper in relationships, and as Sarah mentioned, staying informed about what's happening around the world, at least on a surface level. But it also has the capacity to be a destructive force in our lives. For the last 15 years, I have worked as a therapist in multiple settings, including hospitals, outpatient clinics, and schools. And my work has primarily been with adolescents and their families with a heavy focus on trauma. But in the recent years, I have noticed a significant correlation between social media and mental health. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the impact of social media on mental health, as we have already heard with some of the speakers tonight. Let's start by defining mental health. Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, how we feel, and how we act as we cope with life stressors. It also helps determine how we handle stress, how we relate to others, and how we make life choices. Protective factors are things that contribute to our mental health and allow a person to be resilient in the face of challenges. So as you can see from this chart, there are lots of protective factors, and this doesn't even cover half of them. And you may notice that there are some protective factors that we do not have a lot of control of, such as genetics, the neighborhood that we grew up in, or the family that we grew up with. But a lot of protective factors can be controlled. And the more that we can build upon those, then the more equipped that we can be to handle life's challenges. Over the last decade, we've seen an increase in mental illness across the board. So in 2019, before COVID, 21% of US adults experienced mental illness, which was an increase from the year before. And the statistics are similar among adolescents, where 1 in 5 adolescents will suffer from a diagnosable mental health disorder. And that's just diagnosable mental health disorder. There's tons that are also not. The rates of depression the rates of depression and suicide among 10 to 24-year-olds has increased by 56% from 2007 to 2017. And today, suicide is the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 34. And while it's difficult to make a one-on-one connection or link between social media and mental illness, because there are a lot of variables that we don't have time to explore today, there have been recent studies from institutions like Johns Hopkins University that show that adolescents who spend more than 3 hours per day on social media may be at a heightened risk for mental illness problems. And this is concerning since 97% of people aged 13 to 17 have at least one social media account. And let's not pretend that this is just an adolescent thing. Most of you in this room have at least one social media account. And as you look at this chart, it helps you kind of understand the breakdown based on age. So 72% of adults are on social media. 90% of 18 to 29-year-olds, 82% of 30 to 49-year-olds, and 69% of people aged 50 to 64. So most people are on social media. And no matter what age group you find yourself in, social media use can have an impact on the protective factors that contribute to our mental health. But 2 protective factors I think that are the most greatly impacted are self-esteem and social support. So what is going on? What is the correlation between social media and mental health? Let's take a look at self-esteem, the belief that oneself has value. Social media has provided a way for us to know moment by moment how we are doing in the eyes of others. Not day by day, not hour by hour, but literally moment by moment. through its displays of likes, number of friends, number of followers, interactions on our posts. I recently worked with a 15-year-old girl who came into my office, plopped down on the couch, and said that her friends had created a way to rate each other on social media in terms of attractiveness. My client was upset because she had received a 7, while most of her friends had received a 10. Can you imagine that happening in real life, going out to dinner, sitting at a table with your friends and saying, let's all rate each other on attractiveness right now? And you're a 7, you're a 10, you're a 5, you're a 1. No, because not only would that be ridiculous, but it would even be cruel. But social media provides a platform for us to be able to comment about each other without any direct impact on seeing what that does to the other person. And so while this might not seem like a big thing, over time, this can become debilitating to one's self-esteem. And this is not unlike adults who determine their value or their worth based on their number of friends or their interaction on their posts. When our identity and self-worth is wrapped up in what others think about us versus what God thinks about us, then we start to believe those lies and we measure our self-worth based on worldly standards instead of finding our identity in God, and believing we are who he says we are, which is forgiven, cherished, loved, and valued. Perhaps one of the most profound correlations between social media and mental health is the link between social media and eating disorders. The Eating Recovery Center research found that more than 30 million people in the US suffer from an eating disorder. It also found that the rate of children now being hospitalized for an eating disorder has risen by 119% in the last decade. Social media has a tremendous impact on how we view our bodies and other people's bodies. I think about the client who casually sat down in my office one day and said, I'm thinking about starting a food journal and posting it so my friends could see. Confused, I asked her a little bit more about it, and she said that lots of her friends will post pictures of what they eat during the day, and it becomes this weird competition of who can eat the least and who can be the thinnest. How in the world does social media have this much power? Because it has the potential to weaken our protective factor of self-esteem. It provides a constant gauge for us to know moment by moment how we are doing in the eyes of others. It causes us to compare, have an unrealistic perception of body image, and perhaps even be the victim of cyberbullying. It also impacts our social support, as I mentioned earlier, which is our relationships with others. It has the power to weaken our social support if not used wisely. In my office, I increasingly see the diminished ability to have a face-to-face conversation. Basic skills have been lost, such as the ability to just apologize, like literally say, I am sorry to the person. The teens that I see sometimes have literally never done that. And so we are role-playing how to say, I am sorry. Or people don't know how to express with their words a desire or a need anymore. So most teens, when they are upset at a friend, as Sarah mentioned, they block you. They might unfriend you, or the new lingo I have learned is leave you on open, which basically means they know that you saw their post, but you're not responding to it, and so you're just left hanging there. This is their normal way of dealing with conflict. Social skills are lost, and as a result, social support is not as strong. Now, this is not unlike what we see happening in our adult relationships today either. I think we can look at the recent COVID and recent election as a good example of this. Friends lost over different points of view, name-calling and unfriending. Adults, too, have lost social skills. Surely we can set better examples for our younger generations. When simple, authentic, and intentional communication falls away and we start to have an over-reliance on social media, the relationships that make up our social support will suffer. So what do we do? Where do we go from here? How can we use social media in a way that is warm and nourishing to the soul, like a campfire, and not something that can burn down the barn? Well, since stronger protective factors help us to be better equipped to overcome life obstacles and improve our mental health, it's important that our protective factors are strong before we engage in social media. To strengthen our protective factors, we must develop an internal filter to discern what's helpful and healthy versus what is not. A solid internal filter allows us to use social media wisely, to be kind in our intentions, realistic in our expectations, and healthy in our reality checking skills. Then and only then can social media be an additional camp-like addition to your life. So what does a solid internal filter look like? I think Philippians 4:8 gives us a great model for that. It says, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things." Staying emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually healthy starts by focusing on what is true and noble, pure and lovely. That's what it means to have a solid internal filter. You start by knowing who you are in Christ. If your identity and self-esteem is rooted in his love, then your sense of purpose remains steadfast despite other people's opinions or comments about you on social media. If you believe that you are unconditionally loved by God because of the gospel, then you will interpret your daily experiences and interactions through that filter. And having a solid, gospel-centered internal filter also helps us grow a healthy social support, one that doesn't just exist online. Real-life human, face-to-face interactions are pretty important. That's how God created us. So engage in the community around you. Resist the temptation to have unproductive conversations on social media. And use social media as a supplement, not a substitute for your relational connections. So, as you use social media to guide you and your kids, if you're a parent, think about the impact that it has on your mental and your spiritual health. The big picture goal is to have an internal filter, both yourself and, as we've heard tonight, helping your child or teen develop that internal filter as well. So we want to ask ourselves questions and we want to ask our children questions like, does this help me better understand who I am in Christ? Does viewing this content lead me to compare myself to other people? Does this post ignite anger in me or even hatred towards other people? Does this leave me feeling unsatisfied and searching for more instead of present and grateful? Social media can be a positive force in your life, but it also can be a destructive force if we're not asking these types of questions to ourselves and to our kids. So do not let social media burn down the barn. But like a warm campfire, let's use it to deepen our relationships and better realize our identity in Christ.
Think for a moment with me back to the turn of the century. That's the year 2000. So the year 2000 looks a lot different than what we have now, right? Well, we had a thing called a home phone. We also had a thing called a work phone. We had both of those things. That one was cool right there, right? The internet existed, but yeah, it wasn't fast. You had to get on there online, and it made these weird alien sounds like was described earlier. And also, if once you did get online, you had the America Online person say, "You've got mail." And that was invigorating, right? That was awesome. If you were going somewhere, you had to plan a trip, right? You could do it with this brand new tech that you could just plan it 2 hours in advance. It was called MapQuest. It was great. The year 2000, right? TV shows from that era like Friends and The West Wing are so hard to watch now because all the interactions are so strange and we don't find ourselves in some of those situations anymore. So the advent of the smartphone in 2007, it changed everything. It literally changed everything I just mentioned earlier, like the internet, text messages, home phones, work phones, email, maps, and all of those TV shows, or both those TV shows I just mentioned, or you can watch them on your cell phone right now. Don't do it right now. I don't think it's an overstatement to say that we live in a completely different world as far as technology is concerned than we did in the year 2000. Okay, so now go back with me again to the year 2000, and let's think about the church in the year 2000. If there was an event coming up or a new campus or something else going on, you know how you heard about it? Well, somebody would stand on a stage like this and tell you about it, or they'd tell you to, hey, check out the bulletin, right? If you wanted to meet somebody at church, you know how you met them? In the lobby before the service. If you weren't there, you didn't meet them, right? If you wanted to invite somebody to come to church with you, you had to give them directions. So you don't have to do that anymore. Now, what if I could tell you, I could go back to the year 2000 you, and I could tell you this. Every person would be virtually connected by one online platform. You'd have the ability to connect with somebody you met in the grocery store in a fairly non-weird way. You could literally get instant updates on your friends and your family if somebody got a new job or graduated or got engaged or lost a loved one. You could even, if you wanted to, you could send a video, record and send a video to all of your contacts and all of your people about how much Jesus has changed your life. Again, if I was going to tell you that, the year 2000 you would probably be like, whoa, sharing my faith would be so easy. I mean, seriously, if I had the capability then everyone that I knew would be cared for because I know what was going on in their lives. They would know about Jesus because I was connected with them so often. We wouldn't have to wait to gather to talk to people because we could just talk to them throughout the week because we'd be so connected. Now, friends, as we've heard, over 70% of Americans are connected, are on Facebook. That's your friends, that's your family. And that number's rising. And not to mention any of the other platforms that Sarah did a great job of running down. It gives us a literal virtual connection with practically everyone in the 4B area. Now, if our mission here at Clear Creek is to lead unchurched people to become fully devoted followers of Christ, and it is, and if we want to see every man, woman, and child be 1 degree of separation between somebody that could share the love of Jesus, the gospel, the good news of Jesus to them, and that's also our mission, well, I've got good news for you. We're there. We made it. That time's right now. But the question is, why are we not doing the things that the year 2000 you was so fired up about? Look, we have the ability to seek the interests of others, to love our neighbors, to care for the poor, the sick, the brokenhearted, and we have the ability to do it in a way that has never been possible in human history. You don't believe me? Well, check this out. Pete Fuller from West Campus and his small group found out that the waitress that they had for over a decade couldn't get to work, and they had a car, her car broke down. And so because of the pandemic, she couldn't get another job, she couldn't get anywhere, and so they recognized this need. And Pete Fuller put out this message on Facebook. As you see, he got over 20 comments on that message. And look at what Pete said here. He said, I had a couple people, just because I posted on Facebook, and a couple friends, just from reading that, pitched in to help purchase the car. 8 people combined to raise the money needed to gift her that car, and it started with this post on Facebook. John Williams from right here at the Egret Bay campus actually recognized that people needed food and supplies after Laura ripped through East Texas and Louisiana this past summer. So John and a few friends put out a request on Facebook and Instagram and Nextdoor, and the donations just started coming in, and this was his quote. He said, those donations came in from total strangers. Random people would show up and just like, I don't know you, but here's some stuff. People just came from everywhere, is what he said. Now, a friend of a friend even got in contact with John, probably through social media, I would think. And they set up a distribution center in those areas for people to bring those supplies and food to. They served hundreds, if not thousands of people. And it all started with a post on social media. At the beginning of 2020, our church challenged people to post a picture or video of their baptism and share their faith story. We called it Show Me the Faith. And reading those stories and comments from their friends and their family, I mean, it was one of the highlights of 2020 for me. Seeing students in our student ministry, seeing First Impressions volunteers, staff members, and people that don't even go to our church so openly share their story of how they came to know Jesus online was moving. Now, there are bunches of stories like this on the wild world of social media, right? But honestly, there's not enough. It's not the norm. It's the exception. These posts are the exception. So again, the question is, why are we not doing the things that the year 2000 you were so fired up about? Why are we using this platform primarily to curate our own image, our brands, our self-worth, instead of lifting up the image in which we're created in? Why are we amassing followers of us instead of followers of him? Why are we getting in the comment section, getting in arguments with our neighbors instead of loving them? Now, we have the ability, again, to seek the interests of others, to love our neighbors, to care for the poor, the sick, and the brokenhearted. And the question is, why? Why don't we use this amazing gift that we've literally been placed in our pockets for kingdom work? I think the answer is like most things. We just haven't figured this out. We haven't mastered it. We don't know. But I will say that we're pretty dangerous in all the right ways. We know enough to be pretty dangerous. At Creek, our social media strategy here is to move people to think about things of God on social media and then move them into biblical community. Now, we want people to be informed and inspired by the gospel. That makes sense, right? From an organization, we're kind of an organization here. It makes sense because in effect we're selling something, I guess, if I can use that language. Just like Nike or Whataburger or Toyota, right? We're trying to get people closer to the thing that we're selling as an organization, but we're not selling burgers or cars or shoes. We're selling hope. We're selling life, grace. We're selling Jesus. So, here's my question. What are you selling? When you scroll through your timeline and when you scroll through your profile, what are you selling? What's your strategy? Friends, let's use social media to see the 4B area and beyond move from death to life by the power of the gospel. Let's use it to care for the people, the hurting, the brokenhearted, and let's use it to make disciples of Jesus Christ and move them into deeper walk with him. Because like Nick said at the beginning of this, if we don't do it, who will? Are you with me? Thank you.
All right. Y'all, I have to say, because we only have a few minutes here, but these 3 people, these 6 people, this is just like a glimpse into their heart. This is like a glimpse into how much they care about the church and their students and the people around them and the world. And it's just a good gift that they're here. And I'm just really grateful for what they're doing all the time and that they took the time to be here tonight. So thank you guys so much. It's been a good gift, really. So I'm just going to say before we start, because we don't have a ton of time, that I'm going to ask a few questions, but there's a lot of good questions. And whatever we don't get to, we're going to try to talk about these things on Clear Creek Resources. So over the next few weeks, we're going to try to sort of work through some of this. So if you want to look on there, we'll try to let you know. But there's a lot, y'all know, there's a lot to talk about with these topics. So we're going to try to get there. But let's just jump in. So Lindsay, let me ask you a question first. When it comes to just childhood development, what it looks like to go from a 3-year-old on an iPad to someone leaving for college to an adult, how does that impact how we think about social media and what our kids are doing?
Well, I think it impacts it greatly. There is research out there that would say that really, definitely a child, kid, teenager, whatever, should not even be engaging in social media until at least high school, just based on where their brains are developing at that point. And then there's also information out there about just because of the culture and what we live in, that some of these kids are developing even a little bit later in maturity and being able to make decisions. And so it is scary I would say for sure, to have an 11 or 12-year-old on social media. Their thinking at that point is still too concrete to really be able to develop that internal filter like you heard me talk about today.
Well, is there a difference between boys and girls when it comes to this question?
Yes, I think so. I actually just recently listened to a podcast about this, which was really interesting. It talked about how girls are probably going to be more likely to do the posting. I think the conversations with the boys is going to be a lot more around the commenting, what they are commenting on in the posts. That's one major difference. I think when we look at maybe sexualized behavior, I think we're going to see that, at least in terms of posting, more with the girls. But again, the boys are the ones that are commenting on it. And so I think that's a good place to start in thinking about that question.
I'm just going to ask you because I don't know. When you say like the boys are commenting and the girls are posting, tell me what you mean.
Sure. So let's say a girl posts a picture and there's a lot of cleavage and the boy is commenting on what he sees. I like it or I don't like it. It can be a positive comment. It can be a totally, negative comment, if you will. Yeah.
Okay. That's
so
helpful.
helping. Yeah.
My kids are little. I'm like, what are you talking about? So for a lot of people we know, like Sarah talked about, like this is how they communicate. This is just the world that they live in. So what if you are a parent who doesn't want your kid to have social media? Is that okay? Like how can they have friends? What if you're trying to protect them and so they can't be in these spaces? What would be your advice? All 3 of you, because you're all 3 in this world. Sarah, you start.
Well, I would say first off is trying to see obviously where your kids are at, and all the talks run together. I'm so sorry. Someone said earlier, just kind of gauging where is your child in their maturity, and then looking at, wow, like they're at a decently mature level where we can start having conversations about what is it that you want about social media. Do you just want it because your friends want it? Kind of looking at even if you don't have it, what does that look like in the interactions with their friends? I have dear friends who, when kids come into their house, like there's a bucket and they're like, you can charge your phone. friends of my kid, you can charge your phone in here. And they're like, oh, okay. And so all the kids just drop their phones in there. So it kind of helps create interactions for their kids that are not just driven by cell phones. And so I think it's possible, but also knowing that ultimately at school, these things like, there's only so much protecting, and if you're not the first one to speak into it, then they're gonna hear about it somewhere else. Like their brains are sponges, and so you wanna fill it up so that other things will just kind of roll off.
Do you guys have anything to say about that?
Repeat what the question was again.
Well, if you don't, how do you decide if you don't want them to be involved in social media because we know there's dangers there, then how do you talk to your kids about that, and how do they find friends outside of that if they're using it, like Sarah talked about, so much for communication and news, et cetera?
Yes, you develop a cult and you move away. That's probably what it feels like, right? It's like, oh my gosh, my kids are my friends. That's a really good question. And I think what you mentioned in your talk, Sarah, I have certainly seen in my work of there is this feeling of I'm not going to get the information, I'm going to feel left out, I'm not going to be invited to this thing because, there is no texting. I also would agree with you with the Snapchat. It is, all communication seems to be through Snapchat. So I think I would explore with your kid what would it look like if you didn't have this? What are you afraid of that you would miss out on? Because there might be some things, for example, if they have a tight-knit group of friends and you know the parents, you can assure them you're not going to miss out on X, Y, and Z. Like we're going to communicate, we're going to make sure that happens. I think also we need, it's finding that balance. So I think a lot what Matthew said about if we're giving them that leeway, then it is okay for us to set those ground rules. There's actually programs out there where you can have your kiddo kind of go through different modules that teach them about social media use, online safety, all of these things. So it's kind of like the driver's ed before you give them the keys. So you can require them, and they actually get to write comments, and you get to see feedback. It helps you as a parent have these conversations with them. And so so much of it is about dialogue and conversation and that kind of earned trust, like Matthew talked about.
I'm going back to Matthew because he did a great job. When he talked about building up, groups of friends and family, building up a group of friends that you can trust their kids and how they grow up with raise their kids, it helps because maybe people outside of that group might have social media and everything, but if we've all decided, hey, this is how we're going to attack this thing, it's easier to do than have to do it alone, basically. So get a bunch of friends. How about that?
Yeah, find some good friends.
Can I add to that really quick?
Yeah.
I would also just say, I think what COVID has done is it's removed all those extracurricular activities that our kids have been doing. So they have had a lot of time on their hands. So we want to build that back in, not in a overstructured too much way, but we want to give them those things that they're doing outside of the house so they're not glued to their phones and in their room all the time.
So speaking of being glued to your phone or in your room all the time, when it comes to parents, right, to who we are, we know that matters a lot. So how does our own, as parents or grandparents or just people who are trying to lead others in this issue, how does that matter when we're thinking about social media and how we interact?
Can you clarify
John.
the question? I'm sorry.
Yes. So how you, specifically John,
Yes.
how you engage in social media, how an adult engages in social media affect how our kids engage? And how do you think yourself, okay, this is what I'm doing in social media as a disciple?
Gotcha. It's just like everything else. We call social media a community. That's why they call them communities. And so I would look at what the Bible talks about how communities work. I talked about this in a recent podcast about setting our minds above on Christ. In Colossians 3, it talks about that. But how we act in real life is how we should act online. We should model for our kids how to work on, how to act on social media. So I have a just over a year-old little girl, and she is grabbing for my phone because guess what? I'm on my phone all the time. And so that's just a very simple way to say that they are soaking up everything. So the question is, does it matter? Yes, definitely it matters. And so we should take it seriously for ourselves and learn for ourselves so that we can teach our kids or whoever else.
So whether you're talking about yourselves or even if you're talking about the church, how can we think through how do we engage in social media? We know we've talked a lot, I think, in different ways over this sermon series and in resources about how it can be addictive, it can be a lot, but it also can be used for so much good. So how do we engage in social media in the church for the good of the kingdom? What does that look like? You talked about that, but like specifically, what are we called to do as parents and as we move forward today?
So like Pete, that's a great example, and like John, those are great examples of how to meet a need and use it as a tool to go forward, right? I would like to say that if you're on social media and you're on it a lot and you realize that it's a problem because of what you're looking at or you're spending too much time on it, or other, maybe just dial that back down and get it to this baseline here. If you're not on social media at all, and maybe start thinking about what it would look like to get a social media account and how you can, just what I talked about, use it for the kingdom. It is connection, right? And that's what you talked about. Teens use it as a connection. And so it's a tool, and we're connected to more people than we ever have been, ever. And so I don't know if I answered your question fully, but
you did.
There's a lot of specifics that you can do. These are all really hard questions. Again, we don't know all the answers. We have to try to find our way through it.
So you guys are all in ministry in some way, just like everybody here is. Everybody on the stage has been, and you're all on social media, right? You're not the people who need to that's. As Aaron, he's my husband out there. But what would you say? Like how do you move through that world? What's like one piece of advice you would give? This is like when I get on social media, this is what I'm thinking about as a disciple of Jesus, to just spread the values of the kingdom or bring people to Jesus. What's one thing you would leave everyone with?
Are you asking us all that, or are you asking?
I'm asking you that.
John, no, gosh, man, I should have learned that from you the first session. Jeez. I'll let you answer that one.
I'll go, yeah. So the word that comes to mind when that comes up is transparency. Obviously you need to be wise about how much you throw out on social media, but if transparency in a way that it's a reflection of who you are, and so don't be fake. Don't oversell yourself. Don't undersell yourself. If the things that you post, think about it. Am I posting who I am? And if who you are is a follower of Jesus, don't be afraid to share that, right? And so that's really the big advice, I guess I could say, is transparency. Because there's dangers on both fronts of those.
And I think that comes back down to the internal filter piece, the asking yourself those questions is what I'm about to post, edifying to the body, or is it tearing somebody down? And we can ask our kids those same questions. I would encourage the parents in the room to approach their kid with curiosity, did that be your first approach? Is always curiosity before you go in with guns a-blazing. But, tell me about what this does for you. Tell me about what you like. Tell me about what you don't like. Tell me about, how you felt when your friend said that, or, you just really want to open up that dialogue. You want them to feel like they're on your team. Doesn't mean that you have to be like, oh, well, that's great. You can say, wow, that's concerning. Why do you think that might be concerning? But ask them questions, because they definitely have opinions.
Yeah, I'd say just for me on social media, I think it's being able to be aware, of what you're expressing to others, and that hopefully that Jesus is spilling out in those posts, that people don't just scroll through and they're like, wow, what a good person they are, but hoping to be explicit with it. People don't just assume you're a follower of Jesus, you got to tell them. So tell them why you love on other people, or why you're serving, or why you're letting people come into your home, whatever it is. And also be aware when it's a thing that it's you need to step back from for a bit. Being able to find balance in your own life models it well for not only your kids, but the other people who are watching through social media as well.
That includes the comment section, by the way.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. And I was thinking back to your question about the kids and their friends too, and I was thinking about what you just said, be the home that the kids come to, be the one that opens the doors to the kids, because you then get to sit down and have these conversations. I mean, my daughter, she's only 10, but she already hates me because I'm like, everyone come over, let's talk about all the things. And she's not a talker, but our friends are, so I love it. So, ask them about it, and just be in their world, because they may not always be getting that direction at home, but you can be one of those positive people in their kids and their friends' lives.
Thank you guys so much. This has been so helpful. Y'all have, we could do this for 45 minutes, right? They are so knowledgeable and helpful. So thank you so much for tonight. And thank you guys for coming. I'm so grateful that you're here on this really rainy, gross week. I'm glad you actually walked out of your house. And if you thought tonight was helpful, we're going to post this forum. Like Ryan said, we're going to post it in a couple weeks on clearcreekresources.org, so you can share it with your friends and with your family, or you can just listen again. If you were listening and you're like, I don't really know what Carrie was talking about, because I don't even follow on the internet. Listen to it again and think through the implications of it. And our hope really with all of Clear Creek Resources is that this is what we're doing, that we're really having conversations about these things that really just matter in our life. This is all the aspects of our life that we're walking through, that because Jesus is King and Jesus is our Savior, it affects everything. It affects the internet, it affects social media, it affects our family and our school, and all the things all the time, and everything. So that's what we're hoping it does for you. So we hope that it's a blessing for you, and that it's helpful. And I'm just grateful for you guys and for them who are giving just all their expertise and life lessons for tonight. So thanks for coming. Let me pray for us before we go, and then we're gonna go. Heavenly Father, I am thankful just to be in this space with my family in Christ tonight, God. We are not unaware of the blessing and the privilege it is to just be here together. We're grateful for your generosity in this building, in this space, and for your faithfulness that we could come together and just love one another as your family and worship you together. Father, I'm thankful for the speakers tonight. I pray that you would just bless them, that they would just continue to steward all the good gifts you've given them for the good of the whole world and your church. Father, I pray that you help us to remember the good blessings of technology, of everything you've given us through that, and also to remember the brokenness that comes with that's the world we're in because of the fall, but that we would just, as your people, hold both of those things together and be a light to the world, to embrace the blessings and transform the brokenness into something that draws people to your Son. God, would you make us into people that does that for the glory of Jesus? It's in your Son's name that I pray. Amen.